All right, welcome to this episode of the Experience Project. In this video, I'm just going to ramble through the rifle setup that I'm taking with me on these 3 Alaska hunts. We got caribou up first, moose second, mountain goat third, basically August, September, October. And then also different things I'm using for support, my binocular rangefinders that I'm using, and the specific load that I developed for this gun. This is a 6 Creedmoor, which a lot of people would have a knee-jerk reaction that that's too small of a caliber to go up to Alaska and hunt these animals with. I highly encourage you to go listen to our video series we did with Form on the Experience Project. So there's 2 podcasts and actually a third one that's coming up here soon, where we break down essentially why we're going to shoot this 6mm Creedmoor. And the gist of it is, at the end of the day, animals get wounded because we make poor shots, or we just flat out, an animal doesn't die because we miss. And one of the best ways to decrease the amount of times that you miss is to shoot lighter recoiling rifles. Form goes into tons. It's a 3-hour long podcast. So we broke up into 2 segments of why smaller bullets are just as effective as larger calibers as far as the bullet penetrating into the animal and creating sufficient damage to kill that animal. Why this 108 grade ELDM bullet is going to do more damage than, say, a 7-rim mag with a solid bullet that's not going to expand much. It's going to penetrate, that bullet's going to penetrate very deeply, but not create a lot of damage, where this is going to go in 14 to 16 inches and create a 4 to 5 inch wound cavity inside that animal. So lots of information there. I highly encourage you, if you think I'm an idiot for shooting a 6 Creedmoor, to go listen to that. At the end of the day, I know I've been bow hunting for 20 plus years. I've killed a lot of animals with a 1-inch 2-blade hole through elk, mule deer, moose, mountain goats, bears. I know that this bullet is going to do way more damage than that 1-inch hole, that the animal's going to die. Kind of an interesting observation I've had through this process too is when guys, you got an animal in the scope and you pull that trigger, and if you can't stay in the scope and it jumps out, and if the result right after you pull that trigger is the animal isn't dropping, there's the immediate assumption that, especially when you're shooting a smaller caliber, that you either missed or the bullet isn't sufficient to kill it. We recently had a YouTube video sent to me where they were talking about shooting a moose. They shot it like 5 or 6 times with the 6 Creedmoor. They basically acted as if the animal was going to live, even though the first shot was right through the lungs. It just absorbed it, stood there. If they just let it sit there for 30 to 45 seconds, it was going to collapse. It was a dead animal, but their knee-jerk reaction was the caliber isn't big enough. So I think a really critical aspect, something I need to work on, frankly, is staying in the gun, staying in the scope, and spotting your impacts so you know where you hit, if you missed, if you made a poor shot, if you hit in the guts, if you hit high, etc. Diving into the gun. So 6 Creedmoor. This is the MDT Hunt 26 chassis. I've been running this this will be my 3rd or 4th season running it. Really, really like it. It's super lightweight. Obviously you got the folding mechanism. So when I go to put this on a pack, it's basically sitting flush with my hip. Even with the suppressed, the 5-inch suppressor on there, it's head height for these type of Alaska hunts. The caribou hunt in particular, I've been in this country before. There's a lot of brush. Having that gun be mounted to the pack, but having the barrel not stick way above the head is just incredibly handy. You're not getting that snagged on things. You're able to navigate the country a lot easier. So the chassis, really like that. I did put an aftermarket recoil pad on here. It's called OBI is the company. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's for this Hunt 26 chassis. Definitely a lot better shock absorption in there when that gun goes off. Really like that. Got a 16-inch barrel on here from a company called Paradigm. 5-inch Thunder Beast suppressor on there. Night Force 2.5 to 10x scope. Really love this scope. 20.5 ounces. You got Night Force quality. You can beat the crap out of this thing. It's going to maintain its 0, hold it 0. The 2.5 to 10, a lot of people would have a knee-jerk reaction that 10x isn't a high enough magnification. For me, my effective range, 600 is absolute max. I'd really prefer to stay under 500. that is all the magnification I need. And also being zoomed back out, you're able to spot your impacts a lot better. If you're zoomed into 20x and the gun goes off, it doesn't take much movement for you to get off target. If you're pulled back out, obviously, you know, if the gun jumps at the shot and the animal kind of moves down to the right corner of the scope, you're still going to be able to see it. So being, you know, zoomed in isn't always the greatest thing. I've found myself shooting a lot at 4, 6x on some of the animals I've taken the last few years with this gun. I've got Hawkins rings on here with the level. The level is absolutely necessary for shooting in mountainous terrain. You want to make sure that the gun's level. If you're canted left or if you're canted right, you're going to miss left and right on the animal. Super critical there. Obviously, you got the dial on the scope. With the Swarovski EL ranges, I plug in the ballistics of this. Go over ballistics real quick. So 108 grain ELDM, running 42.4 grains of H4350 in here. This is alpha OCD brass with a CCI small magnum primer on there. Velocity is 2940 right now. So actually really great velocity out of this 16-inch barrel. So I plug all that information, the BC of the bullet, into the app on my phone. It syncs over to the binoculars. The binoculars are pulling the pressure, all sorts of sensors on here. It's pulling altitude, pressure, it's pulling temperature. Basically, I can range, it's going to say 400 yards, and then immediately a second later is going to give me what to dial for. So all I got to do is dial to 6 MOA, hold the crosshairs right mid-body or wherever I'm aiming for, pull the trigger. It really completely eliminates the variable of distance, bullet drop, things like that. And now all I have to do is account for the wind. I don't really geek out on wind. I know if it's a right to left wind and the animal's at 500 yards, 10-mile-an-hour wind, I have 12.4 inches of drift. So I'm just going, okay, is it 10, is it 5, is it 15? And I'm just holding, the stronger the wind is, you know, on all these animals. Fortunately, you know, the body depth on an elk, moose, you're gonna have a big target. Caribou's gonna be a little bit smaller. Mountain goat, maybe even a little bit smaller than that. Obviously, height can be critical. You got a lot of fudge factor when you're looking left and right, from basically liver all the way up to in front of the heart, where that animal's still gonna die. And so I'm just holding right edge of the animal. I don't bother to dial. That's my system. It works for me. I'm not doing crazy competitive stuff, or you need just a certain base level of precision to kill an animal. You've got a large, you know, 14 to 18 inches left and right to hit. So if the wind's blowing right to left, we did a podcast with Ryan Kleckner years ago, and he basically said, if you're not holding right edge of that animal, you're making a mistake, right? Like, you know your bullet's gonna go left. You don't know how far left it's gonna go. You know it's gonna go left, so hold right edge of the vitals. If the wind completely stops, you still have a dead animal. If a big gust of wind comes and pushes it 12 inches, you still have a dead animal. So very simple windage call. That's what has been working for me. I'm still relatively new to rifle. Been doing this for 6 years now, but have spent a lot of time, talked to a lot of people, and been very effective out there in the field doing that. So as far as, so I got the gun, I got the chassis, barrel, suppressor. I'll talk about the suppressor for a little bit. Obviously, I'm all about saving every drop of weight as possible. I would love to take this 5 inches off, have my gun be even shorter when it's strapped to the pack. When you're out there in the field, just carrying it around, it's nice. What we have seen with suppressors is the animal's reaction post-shot is completely different than if you had a muzzle brake or nothing on there at all. To me, the best way I can describe it is if a tree fell or a rock fell, the animal hears the noise, they pick their head up, they look around, and they go, what was that? There's not this immediate like shot of adrenaline where the animal just starts taking off. Sample size matters. You know, I've seen this 20 times, so maybe over the last handful of years, maybe that's not a large enough sample to say definitively the animals react differently. I'm just saying in the last 4 or 5 years since we've been shooting suppressors, I've seen it time and time again where the animals just stand around, get confused. So the chance to get a second shot if you made a poor shot is greater. Especially say if you're taking youth hunting or something like that, I would absolutely be suppressed, because the chance to get a second shot I think is much, much greater. Again, don't have a huge sample size here, but it's just something I've certainly noticed. As far as supports go, basically I've got quite the gamut here. Bipod, this is called the Mountain Gear bipod out of a company out of New Zealand. super, super lightweight. If you're a long range guy, you're going to be, now that it's, you know, it's got some movement to it. It's not the most rock steady thing, but it weighs 5-ish ounces, incredibly lightweight, has a lot of adjustment on it. You can run that all the way out, so you can get quite a bit higher. You can kick the legs forward if you want. They go all the way forward. They go back. You can change, there's another button here where you can change the angle of it, so you can get really wide, you can get narrow. Really, for 5 ounces, the amount of adjustment in this thing is pretty incredible. Again, not, if I was trying to shoot small little groups at 1,000 yards, not what I'm doing while I'm out hunting. I think there's, if you're familiar with archery, it's kind of just talk about like pie plate accuracy. Obviously you want to be as accurate as possible, but there's give and takes, and really with animals, you do have a pretty large window to hit that animal and still be very effective at killing it. I have a homemade rear bag that I use. So this is something I just sewed up at our sew shop, and I will stuff this with game bags or socks or something like that. Incredibly handy when I do get the opportunity to lay prone. In my opinion and my experience, I am very rarely prone. I was driving out to shoot videos this morning and I was trying to reflect in my mind all the different times that I have actually shot prone over the last 5-6 years, and I can think about maybe two or three times. In the mountains, uphill, downhill, it's pretty rare where I've been able to get prone. And so the ability to have options to shoot elevated. So if you're on a downhill slope and there's an animal across the draw, you're obviously not going to lay prone unless you back all the way up to the top of the ridge behind you, which some cases could, get you out of range of that animal. So the ability to sit on a down slope and shoot an animal level or even above you, you need something supporting the front of the gun to get it elevated where you can get the rear of the gun down low. That's where basically you got the tripod and trekking poles that give you that option. So these are our original SNS archery trekking poles with the Wiser Precision quick sticks on there. You can basically open that up like that, set the gun in there and shoot from. You can obviously adjust the height up and down. You can pinch them together to get it taller. You can open it up to get it wider. Those are a little squeaky right now, I've shot more animals with those the last handful of years than I have any other support. And through practice, one thing I highly encourage is when you're out there hunting and it's kind of midday, you're not necessarily like in the zone hunting at that moment, practice this stuff. Just stop wherever you're at, find something, a white rock at 400 yards away, and then in your mind go, how am I going to build a position to shoot that rock? And you just need to start running through, okay, is that tripod? Is that off my backpack? Can I get prone? Do I need my trekking poles here? I really encourage you, I do this all the time, at least once a day when I'm out there. That way, when you get into, 2 hours later or 2 days later, you get into a situation, you immediately go, oh, that's how I did it the other day. This is a similar shot. It's kind of muscle memory at that point. You're not trying to figure it out on the fly. So definitely highly encourage that. One thing I skipped, the MDT Hunt 26 chassis has the built-in ARCA rail. I'm a big fan of this. One, because on my tripod, I can run an ARCA mount there. This bipod is ARCA mount. You have the ability to slide up and down on that rail. So depending on where you're at in the mountain, where you need the support, it just gives you a lot of flexibility there. I really like that feature, especially on the tripod. Generally with the tripod, I'm going to run it closer to the trigger here. The rifle's going to be able to balance on there better. So going to the tripod, this is a ASIAC tripod, super lightweight with a Wiser Precision Nighthawk head on there. If all I was doing was shooting, I would run a ball head. But I absolutely hate ball heads when it comes to putting binoculars and a spotting scope on there. The downside to shooting off of something like this is that it's hard to get the gun level. I have no way to level within the head. I have to go to the legs. So if I'm set up on the animal and I look and my bubble's all the way over, my only option is to reach down to a leg and adjust that. Again, one of those things through practice, you get pretty proficient at this. If the only decision was speed, then I would go with a ball head. But I from a glassing perspective, I absolutely hate them. So this is what I run. This is admittedly a very light weight setup to shoot off of. I wouldn't go to the range and run 1,000 shots off this, but for a couple shots here and there, get familiar with it, practice with it, and then up in the mountains, it's totally adequate. Scope caps, that's another issue. This is something that's absolutely critical to keep your rifle scope, your optics clean. I made the mistake the first time I went up to Kodiak, Alaska. You know, in Idaho, we don't deal with a lot of weather. If I had lens wipes, when you get somewhere where you have a lot of moisture, having your scope caps on there to keep the rifle scope clean, hopefully fog-free, can make a huge, huge difference. So these are, I can't even remember the name of this company, AAD mount. They actually clamp on. They're a little bit noisy. I need to put like some felt here, something like I would on a bow to kind of make that quieter. Obviously, if it's 500-yard shot, the animal's not going to hear that. But if you're in close and tight, then you would. But I've ran some Butler Creek ones in the past that, when we're on Kodiak, all of a sudden I look down and they've fallen off because it's just like a rubber piece that slides over, and they're not, it's not clamped on there, really stuck on there well. You could probably tape on or do some things, but these ones actually just have a physical little Allen wrench bolt there that you tighten, and they're on there and they're not coming off. My magazine in here is just an MDT 3-round magazine. I've got 3 in here all the time. I never run a round in the chamber, just for safety perspective. We're in the mountains, tripping, falling. Just not something that I'm willing to take the risk on. I don't want to shoot myself or shoot a buddy just because I was worried about being able to shoot an animal as fast as possible. Generally, I don't want to be making that rush of a shot on an animal. And obviously, if there's elk and I'm stalking them, I'm going to rack around in there and be sneaking quietly. And if a quick shot happens, it happens, but it's going to be a close distance. And when you're in that situation, when we're just hunting, rifle strapped to the pack, then I never have a round in the chamber. So I'll run 3 in the magazine, and then usually what I like to do is I'll in my binocular chest harness, I can add, I think I get 7 rounds in there. Say on this first hunt, I see a caribou and, okay, we're gonna stalk it. I'm gonna grab one of those rounds, drop it into there, obviously make sure the safety's on. So that way I've got 4 in case I need it. You can run larger magazines. I just like the lightweight, low profile version here with just being flush at the bottom with that 3-round magazine. That pretty much covers it all. I love this setup. I've been hunting with a 6.5 Creedmoor for the last 4 or 5 years with a 125 grain solid copper bullet. I have killed everything I've pointed it at. I had 1 deer on Kodiak where I had to shoot it multiple times. I'd hit a little bit far back, and then we found it an hour later and I had to shoot it again. Everything else has died in sight. What I had noticed with that solid copper bullet was, one thing, the pro of it was very minimal meat damage. So I'm a meat hunter. I'm getting as much meat as possible off that animal. What I knew was going to happen, hasn't happened yet, but I think it would if I continued to shot that bullet, was eventually I was going to lose an animal. I was going to shoot it, make, maybe not a perfect shot, but a lethal shot, but it's going to run 500 yards, 800 yards, pile up in some brush. And what I had seen with that bullet was almost field point-like entrance. It shed its front petals into the animal, and then what exited was basically a blunt field point out the back side of it. So there's plenty of animals that I shot, they ran 20 yards, they piled up right there. But when I started skinning the animal, I realized there was not a lot of damage on the entrance and exit. So I knew at some point, it's kind of inevitable that an animal would run off and I would have no blood to find it, and I would never recover that animal. With this 108 ELDM technically match bullet, my fear is I'm not going to like the amount of meat damage. I have 0 concerns that this is going to kill an animal quickly and effectively. My biggest concern is I'm not going to be happy with how much meat loss I'm getting. And I'm going to be, obviously I want the animal dead, but if I know shot 1 is perfect right through the lungs, I'm not going to keep racking around in there and shooting this thing unless it's like on the mountain goat hunt and it's about to fall off a cliff and I want it to stay right there. Sure, I'll keep shooting. But if it's on the moose hunt or the caribou hunt and the first shot's dead, the animal's dead standing on its feet, I'm just going to let it take the 30 seconds and die. I'm not going to just pump it full of lead to where I'm losing a bunch more meat, because number one, I am a meat hunter and I want to take as much of that home to my family as possible. So that's my concerns with that bullet. Obviously, I expressed my concerns with the solid copper bullet. Everything kills. We're just trying to get to, if we shoot 100 animals or 1,000 animals, which one's going to kill at the most effective rate. So is it 80%? Is it 90%? Is it 95%? I don't know how high you can get. This is obviously an experiment this year with going even lighter to a 6 Creedmoor and a 108 grain bullet. Again, with my 20 plus years of archery experience, the animal's going to die. If I do my part, I put that bullet in the vitals of the animal, it's going to die. That bullet isn't going to bounce off the fur and the animal's just going to walk away like a bee stung it. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. So it'll be interesting. We'll document it all through the videos, show you our results, and go from there. So hope you enjoyed this episode of the Experience Project. Keep following along. We've got lots and lots more content coming.